home education, and it's a book about our journey through home education to adulthood alongside 4 other families. And I'm going to do chapter 7, and hopefully that'll be alright. Chapter 7 is exploration of home education. Why home education? When Simon was struggling at school and the system was failing him, I was desperate. I had a child who was becoming increasingly miserable, introverted, stressed, so I began to research the alternatives, which seemed to be keep him in the state system, Steiner Waldorf schools, private school system, homeschooling, home education. When I discussed Simon's problems, with the headmistress, she suggested that I could try a different school. And though this may have solved the immediate issue of bullying and Simon's relationship with his class teacher, I realised we could have the same issues again, as he was also having problems in his schoolwork, keeping up with his peers, so I decided against it. I had come across some of Rudolf Steiner's philosophy and his child development concepts, which made sense to me. So I decided to investigate the Steiner Waldorf schools that were based on his teachings. The first thing I did was to send an email to the head office of the Steiner Waldorf Schools Fellowship, asking about their schools and suggesting that I was considering home education. Sadly, their reply advised me that home education should be my last resort, but they offered me little encouragement for anything else. I researched different Steiner Waldorf schools, where they were, what age range they catered for, whether there was residential or daily attendance. One that sounded quite good was in South Devon, which was too far away. But one near Stroud was having an open day. The school was about 60 miles round trip, and I would have been prepared to do it twice a day if the school had proved suitable for Simon. So I went along to visit. However, as we were shown around the school, I did not feel that it really reflected Rudolf Steiner's philosophy of child learning and development. We were shown classrooms with rows of desks and children sitting facing a blackboard. I found out that most of their style of teaching was didactic, which would not have suited Simon. While visiting this school, I went into their small bookshop where I found a very useful book called Free Range Education: How Home Education Works by Terry Doughty. I cried on the way home from the Steiner School, as I felt it was not significantly different from the state system. Thankfully, when I read the book I had bought, I found it was inspiring and helped me to have the courage to seriously consider home education. I discussed a private school with a parent whose children attended one near Cirencester. Though the cost would have caused a level of hardship, the school system didn't appeal to me. It was a very long day as they travelled by coach morning and evening and included Saturday morning. I looked at their son, who was the same age as Simon. He looked very tired, with bags under his eyes, and he had become withdrawn. My instincts told me that the school would likely present the same problems we already had with Simon. The daughter of a customer of mine attended a private home for her education. The family there ran this facility for their own children and brought in private tutors. They allowed a small number of children to join them at a nominal cost. This was homeschooling in the true sense. In March 2002, Simon and I watched a Channel 4 documentary about different methods of educating children away from school. It featured this home school and my customer's daughter, and my son had met this child. I chose home education because of the bullying and the school system, which was not working for Simon. He was clearly becoming withdrawn and bottling his frustrations. Having taken the decision to remove Simon from school, we became a part of an active home education group based in Swindon, and we are now friends today, 20 years later. We all followed our own form of child-centred autonomous learning and joined in with lots of groups and activities. This is a quote from George Bernard Shaw. What we want to see is the child in pursuit of knowledge, not knowledge in the pursuit of the child. So what is home education? For me, the difference between homeschooling and home education is that the first is a school in someone's own home. The dictionary definition of homeschooled is at home being taught by the parents, whereas home education is about not going to a formal school or institution. However, the term home education still implies being taught at home, which is actually very far from what we did, and you can see that in chapter 6. When I was asked about Simon's education, I would say that we followed a child-centred autonomous learning process, which literally meant that if Simon showed an interest in something, we pursued it, and if he didn't, we didn't. Today this is known as unschooling. Taking this unschooling philosophy to the wider picture of life is known as radical unschooling, or whole life unschooling, and is applied to every area of a child's life, not just education. Though you could argue that all life is about learning and having the freedom to learn, this is certainly the path we took alongside the other families in this book. There are many ways to facilitate the learning or education of children other than in the formal regime of school classroom, though society has quite a rigid, deep-rooted belief that what education and learning is formed over generations. Perhaps it's time to question the deeply embedded metaphors on how we relate to the reality around us. Is home education legal? At the time that Simon was refusing to go to school and subsequently announced that he didn't want to go to school anymore, I was more concerned about his emotional well-being than if I was breaking the law, even though I am, as always, have been law-abiding. If you pose the question, who is responsible for the children's education, most people will say that the responsibility lies with the school, and they would be rather surprised to find out to the contrary. The headmistress told me that it was the law for Simon to attend school, but I knew that I could take lawful responsibility for his education. In fact, in the first instance, it is the parent or carer's responsibility to decide on their children's educational path. The law, Section 7 of the 1996 Education Act, states that it is the duty of parents to secure education for children of compulsory school age. The parent of every child of compulsory school age shall cause him to receive efficient full-time education suitable to his age, ability and aptitude, and to any special educational needs he may have, either by regular attendance at school or otherwise. At school or otherwise. As a parent, you must make sure your child receives a full-time education from the age of 5. But you don't have to follow the national curriculum, and it doesn't necessarily need to be at a school. It is the education that's compulsory, not the school. Home education comes under the or otherwise part of the law, and that is where education otherwise got their name. Sorry, I'm going on a bit now. Shall I carry on? Sorry. The local authority can make an informed inquiry to check your child is getting a suitable education at home. However, they do not have any authority unless they suspect that the parent is not fulfilling their parental obligation. In this case, the authority needs to legally prove it before they're able to serve the school attendance order. When Simon refused to go to school, I was advised by IPSI, Independent Panel for Special Educational Advice, to contact the Educational Welfare Officer, the EWO, before they came knocking on my door, as Simon was still legally registered at the school. This is when I first met Mr. Rigby, who was very helpful and supportive, and he advised me to send a letter of deregistration to the school. From the beginning of home educating Simon, I kept a photographic and video record of all our activities. This was to ensure that I could prove he was participating in a wide range of activities. Education Otherwise, which is a national organisation for home educators, produced a card for home educated children to carry. It quotes the law on one side and has an explanation that the child is legitimately out of school on the other. Simon carried one of these, and he regrets that he was never stopped by a truancy officer. Both James and Dan, who were part of our group, were stopped at different times. Dan was stopped one day by a community police officer when he was walking the 5 minutes walk to James's house. James was in Swindon town one day with his mother, Sheena, and they had separated to do their own shopping. James had a present for Sheena hidden inside his coat, as he didn't want her to see it. He was stopped by a truancy officer who asked what he had inside his coat and wanted to take him to the police station, even though he showed his Education Otherwise card. Thankfully, Sheena came along at that moment and backed up James's story. At our home education group, Sheena was our go-to person with regards to the law and dealing with authorities. She was able to quote the law, and she was also the local representative for Education Otherwise. Just a couple of pages, is that all right? When I spoke the pros and cons of home education, when I spoke to the families featured in this book, I asked each of the children what they liked and disliked about being home educated, and here are a few of their answers. Likes. Freedom was the most common answer. Freedom to choose what they did and when they wanted to do it. Freedom to access the sports facilities when they were almost empty, and freedom to take holidays at any time without consequence of higher costs or fines. Simon said, being home educated was the best time of my life to date. I had the freedom to do what I wanted and when I wanted to. Ruby said, for me, the best thing about being home educated was having freedom. James, I was quite happy being educated from home. Colin, I had the freedom to do what I wanted and I was still learning in the process. Aidan, I enjoyed the freedom to be able to pursue what I was interested in. Dan, I felt free, safe and happy. Dislikes. The main dislike was the general feeling of disapproval from members of society who believed that children should go to school. There was some feeling of not having an appreciation of time management and timetabling, and the lack of repetitive practice did not help when they subsequently joined mainstream further education. So Simon said, in the very beginning I felt embarrassed and self-conscious when going out, when there were no other children about. Ruby said, I didn't like it when some adults would quiz me. James, I felt a bit frustrated when I was asked by an adult what year I was in. He had never been to school, so that meant nothing to him. Colin, doing my first degree through Open University at home, I realised that I missed the university experience. Aidan, I found that I was not as quick as I needed to be when given a time constraint. Dan, I went to college to meet more people. Here's another page, yes. Okay. Deschooling. Sorry, I'm taking a long time here. Deschooling. Deschooling is about unlearning. I didn't record it.
Oh.
Deschooling is about unlearning what was learnt at school. The emotional trauma, the feeling of inadequacy, bottling the anguish, being crushed under the weight of the education system, feeling sick every morning waiting for the bus, depression. This list is not exhaustive, but it does describe where Simon was when he took his first step away from this institution. The biggest sadness for me was that he had become too scared to try anything in case he got it wrong. This took him a long time to move on from, and it still very occasionally rears its ugly head sometimes over 17 years later. We're now 23 years later. So, to facilitate deschooling, it is necessary to give your child the space to just be, to explore who they are and what they are interested in. No pressure or expectations. No need for them to think about the school stuff which caused them the pain. This is a quote from Jiddu Krishnamurti. Is that?
Krishnamurti.
There is no end to education. It is not that you read a book, pass an examination and finish with education. The whole of life, from the moment you are born to the moment you die, is a process of learning. And there's another one by someone called Madeleine Hunter. Expecting all children the same age to learn from the same materials is like expecting all children the same age to wear the same size clothing.